This call may be recorded for coaching purposes.
Hello. Yeah, just a minute. Put my music off. There you go. Hello, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. In the last week.
It's exciting.
Yes.
Exciting.
I'm gonna miss you.
You're gonna graduate. It's exciting.
Well, we missed you, Deanna.
Oh, how's everyone doing? Hey, Dana. Hey, Howard. Good to see everyone. All right, let's see. Well, we are so glad that it came into your life and you're graduating. We'll have to do the whole hat thing, so that's exciting.
Oh, we're gonna send one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I should be sending graduation hats. My bad. I'm so sorry. All right, so it looks like we have Mr. Ryan Deiss in the house today. How are you, Ryan?
I am great, Deanna. How are you?
Awesome. All right, so we're going to put you on the spot. Everyone's super excited to have you here today, and our elites get this special time with you. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure to be here. Thanks to everybody who is a part of this group and of this program. I'll tell you, I know for Roland, it's pretty cathartic to be able to actually share this stuff. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we've been working on for almost a decade, and he is maybe shared from time to time at a war room meeting and stuff like that, but stuff that we've been working on. So I can tell you from my perspective, it's been cool to watch my business partner get to kind of step out into the forefront and for everybody to see just what a genius this person is. It's also been really great to anytime you teach something, it forces you to systemize it, right? It's amazing how much you learn when you teach. And so I know that it's made us better as a company as well. And really what I'm going to be sharing with you here, those of you who have been in this program for a bit and you extended your coaching, and so you're kind of seeing me for the second time, I just want to be totally transparent. I'm going to be covering probably 90% of the same material that I covered the last time. That's for a couple reasons. Number one, there's a ton of new people that are on. Number two, even if you heard it once, I'll guarantee you didn't get it all. And number three, we're still going to have the opportunity to just answer and address any questions that you have. So I'm going to run through kind of the core of my presentation really as quickly as possible without just talking fast and rambling really fast, which I'm really good at doing, because I want to get to the Q&A. I want to get to the specific practical kind of matters of that. But it just, as a way of kind of kicking things off, I want to give you the perspective that I'm coming from. I'm coming from the perspective of now that you are thinking not just about marketing a business, but you are thinking about acquisition, which means you're inherently thinking about building and growing a portfolio. What that means is that even if you fashion yourself as quite a good marketer, it is a fundamentally different thing to market within a portfolio versus marketing a single company. So if you're a good marketer, I want to talk about what it means and how your role as a marketer will shift if you adopt this portfolio mindset. I also want to talk to those of you who know nothing about marketing, and you're approaching this from an investor first perspective, basically saying, I know that a lot of the companies that I acquire are going to have, some issues. They're not all going to be perfect. So with that in mind, how can I help these companies grow? So that's kind of the perspective. That's what I want to leave you with. And by the time we're here, just give you a lot of confidence that you can build marketing systems and strategies at a portfolio level, all right, without having to just outsource to agencies who may or may not know what the heck that they're doing. And I don't even mean outsource, because very often you'll want to leverage agencies. I mean, abdicate to a lot of agencies and just hope that they do a good job. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover here. What I'm going to do right now, Deanna, it says that the host has disabled screen sharing, which is going to make things a bit more difficult. For me,
I'm fixing that right now.
I could mime. I wouldn't have to mime. I could just.
You are a host. You're good.
Yeah. We've done this before, haven't we?
We have, just a few times.
Yeah, and what I will simply say, it is difficult when I go into screen share mode for me to see any of the chat. So if you do have questions, by all means, ask them in the chat. And Deanna, not that she needs my permission, but Deanna is fully authorized to interrupt me in a moment's notice if that's what it takes to make sure that you get an answer. So if you're stuck, go. But again, we will be leaving some time at the end to answer all of your questions, whether we're talking about, how do you build marketing teams? How do you work with agencies? Really anything kind of in and around that. Happy to answer those questions, or heck, anything else, right? This is your time. So don't think that your questions even have to pertain to the topic at hand. So jumping right in, I'm going to talk about how, what it looks like to grow what we call an orbital portfolio. I'll share why we think about it like an orbital portfolio, and why I believe that when you are going out there and looking for acquisitions, while you might want to adopt this kind of orbital portfolio mindset, and really what it means to scale your sales and marketing when there's more than one company to market. It is one thing to double down and do the marketing for one company. It is an entirely different mindset and an entirely different process when you own and are in some sense responsible for the growth of multiple companies. So we'll get into that. Really quickly, I don't want to be presumptuous and assume that everybody on this call knows who I am. So I will, on this training, so I'll share just very briefly. So my name is Ryan Deiss, along with Roland Frazier and Richard Lindner. I'm one of the founding partners of Scalable Equity. And Scalable Equity is our holding company that we invest out of, that owns that really acquires and in many cases builds and launches the companies that we own within our own portfolio. Kind of my day job is I am CEO of Scalable.co, which is our brand new offering. I would encourage you, I'm literally, as soon as I get off of this training, I'm going to click send on the first newsletter. So might want to go to Scalable.co and subscribe to the newsletter. I think it's pretty good, as well as digitalmarketer.com. And then we have a software product that we're launching at recess.io that I still serve as CEO for that company. But if I'm being honest, sort of like Queen of England, Richard Lindner and Justin Rondo do all the work there. So that's just a few. And when I say just a few, I mean that. All told, in our portfolio today, there's about a dozen or so brands and business units. Really, throughout my career, it says 13 companies and counting. Depending on how you slice and dice it, it's actually been a lot more than that. So I use the term serial entrepreneur. I know it's thrown out a lot, so much that it's lost much of its meaning. But I would say that I am a serial entrepreneur, and I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing. To a certain extent, it would probably be better if I pick something and just focused. Oh, what's the fun in that, right? And if you're here, you probably agree with that. So, but what that's meant is that I've lived the reality of starting over from scratch each and every time. A lot of times people ask me the question, like, what would you do if you lost everything? You lost your list, all your products, and you had to start over from scratch with just your knowledge. We literally live that reality every other month or so when we acquire a company that is slightly outside of our, existing group, or whether we launch something new. It's something we live, which is why, just what I have to share with you has been born out of a lot of that experience. I also wrote some books, not really relevant, but I just feel like it makes me sound important. So throwing that out there. At the end of the day, I'm known as a marketer, but what I will confess to all of you, and this is especially important, those of you who are subscribers and are familiar with Digital Marketer, if you've attended Traffic and Conversion Summit, I will confess to you, I do very little marketing on a day-to-day basis. That's why when it comes to Digital Marketer, you mostly see other people doing the talking and doing the teaching, other people, in the trenches. So I've really had to figure out, what does it mean to scale myself as a marketer? So that's what I'm talking about today. What does it mean to scale as a marketer? So if you are a marketer, how do you go from being a marketer of one to a marketer of many? And similarly, what does it mean if you don't know a dang thing about marketing to begin to build some marketing principles and practices? Because believe it or not, the solution to both of those extremes is the same. Now, just to give you some context, I want to go through really how we order and structure things here at Scalable Equity. We think about it as an orbital portfolio model. What do I mean by an orbital portfolio? It's just simply the analogy that we use to describe how we think about adding new planets, if you will, to our solar system. So if you think about the sun, for us, the sun is Scalable Equity. The sun is our holding company. Okay, that is the sun. That is the source of energy. That is the source of light, but it's not the source of life. Just like our own planet, there's no life on it. At Scalable Equity, our holding company, there's no customers there. Scalable Equity does not generate revenue as an operating business. It simply provides the light and energy to our other business units, which are represented as planets. Okay, so within our holding company, that's where we provide things like funding, right? So if we're going to, fund an acquisition, that's going to come from the holding company. It's also where we provide energy in the form of new ideas, big breakthrough concepts. If we're going to, really build something, that energy is going to come from that holding company. That's where, Roland, Richard, and I, and a very small team sits. Now, when you look at the planets, right? The planets for us are a business unit. Okay, now a business unit is defined as a company that has its own team and is operating on its own P&L. Okay, so a business unit is a company that is operating on its own P&L and has its own team. It also needs to be, and this is important, audience first, media first. So digital marketer is a business unit, has its own team, operating on its own P&L, and it is very much a media company, all right? Whereas you take Recess.io, which is the software company I mentioned before, Recess is not yet a business unit. It doesn't yet have its own team. It's beginning to operate on its own P&L, but the problem is that it doesn't own its own media. And so one of the things that we require out of our business units is that they must own their own media. They must kind of be that source of life, that source of customers. So Scalable.co, that is a new business unit. And Recess will be a moon that orbits around Scalable.co. So planets are business units. Those are media first, audience first properties. The moons that orbit around those planets are the different product brands. Now, here's what I want you to understand about our model. Once we have established a planet, once we've colonized one of these planets, so to speak, we can then, from that planet, leverage that as a launch pad to both go and colonize additional moons, meaning we can launch new product brands. So in the case of Digital Marketer, we launched Lab, which is our membership program. We launched Traffic and Conversion Summit, right? We launched True Conversion, which was a software property. Okay, we've launched a number of different products. Our certified partner program is a moon that orbits around it. So once you've established a planet, once you've fully colonized a planet, you can then leverage that as a launch pad to colonize new moons, but also to colonize new planets. So the launch of Scalable.co was actually the colonization of a new planet. We think about it as a new planet, a new business unit, because it's a slightly different audience. Digital Marketer is all about marketers. Scalable.co is going to be all about entrepreneurs and founders. We will then go from there and be able to launch additional planets in the B2B space. And that is our model. That's how we developed. Now, prior to this, we recently, exited a number of our holdings, but we did this in the consumer space. So we actually owned a property in the survival and preparedness space. That was a planet, right? We had a number of different brands in and around that planet. We then, from that space, leveraged it to launch a new planet that was in the homesteading, kind of gardening type space. And then from there, we actually launched another planet that was in the beauty and the makeup space. So I just kind of want to linger there for a little bit. If you do this right, and if you have audience first properties, you can actually take some of your audience that's here and take a small sliver of that audience with you to actually help to colonize and be those settlers to help launch a brand new area. And this is a way to sort of grow organically And now when we think about acquisition, more times than not, we're acquiring moons, right, to help supplement the planets that we have. So that's kind of the broader category, and the comments that are out there, those sort of are indicative of strategic partnerships, things like that. Every now and then a moon will get big enough and build up its own mass that it becomes its own planet. That's what happened with Traffic and Conversion Summit, right? The moon got so big that it actually spun out and created its own orbit. So I just want to give this context because it kind of speaks to how we go about building marketing systems and strategies for these. But I want to pause here and just see, are there any questions about the general structure that we're kind of pursuing that that you would like for me to address and to talk about?
Erwin had a question of how would you manage the several solar systems? So like moons are like the assets.
Yeah, great question. So within each planet, there is a general manager. That general manager reports into the board, and the board is Roland, Richard, and I. We might also have a separate cap table there. So perhaps, we haven't done it lately, but every now and then we'll launch something new and have a partner that's outside of the group. And so, the cap table might be a little bit different. That is actually the case with Traffic and Conversion Summit because we sold a majority stake in that. So now there is a board that is made up of Roland, Richard, and I, plus some people from the company that acquired it, right? So, but back to the management of it, there is a general manager, and then that general manager is primarily responsible for revenue. So they're the sales and marketing type. The general manager is usually going to have a marketing manager reporting into them, and then they're also going to have a head of product reporting into them. That is the basis of the team. They don't really need accounting, finance, general technology and operations. We keep that centralized at the holding company level. So with these planets, we're actually able to keep them pretty lean and mean. And that's the general structure of that. You can see how the first thing that we want to be self-contained is the product, the value that they're delivering, but also marketing. We need somebody down at the business unit level who's uniquely responsible for marketing and growth. So those would be kind of the, we can launch a new business unit with as few as 3 people, a general manager who's usually serving as kind of that head of marketing, a promotions manager who's responsible for kind of the copywriting, things like that, and then a head of product or a head of content, depending on the structure of the company. That usually is enough to get one of these things launched, and then we build the teams out from underneath those.
Kyle actually had a question about, is it one holding company for everything? You mentioned that.
Yes, so all of these business units are wholly owned subsidiaries of Scalable Equity, which is our holding company.
That's all the questions right now.
Cool. Yeah, so digital marketer, yes.
Just a quick question, because that's not what I meant. How would you manage several solar systems? So because I'm more in a situation that I maybe would have be the super sun and I maybe different solar systems. I don't know, have you an idea about this? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so we don't think about it as managing different solar systems. We look at it as so there's always just one centralized holding company, one sun, and we want to have multiple planets underneath that. If you are going to be managing different solar systems, then likely what you are is you're an investor in those different ones. But to basically be doing active investing and active management. So what we do at the Scalable company is not passive, just investing, right? We're actively managing these different businesses. So at this point, at least, with our team, I don't believe that we could effectively manage all of these different solar systems. But I'll tell you, within our broader solar system, you can manage a vast array of business units. It's not like they all have to be related to, business to business, right? If we've got at our central holding company, finance and accounting, if we've got the ability to do M&A, legal, people and culture, from within that, as well as just strategy from within that, we can then bring in literally dozens. I mean, Roland, Richard, and then Perry, a former partner of ours, we had at one point about a dozen of these different planets that we all spun off and sold off in the last 2 years. So our solar system has gotten smaller. We'll make it bigger again, though. It was just time to sell off some of those other ones. But the
That was a
solar
great
system is
question, Erwin.
defined by, yeah, thank you for the clarification. The solar system is defined by the holding company, by that centralized holding company.
Yeah, but if you have two different holding companies, you and then with another business partner come separate, basically I have two solar systems.
Yeah. And so what you've got to make sure is that you've got two really rock solid teams there, or what you're going to wind up doing is you are going to, so like it's the same, I'll use an analogy that we do in terms of kind of the planetary analogy. So a mistake that we've made in the past is before we had a good solid base, you know, again, maybe it's taking the analogy too far, but before we built up a really good solid, you know, colony on one planet that could fully sustain and support itself, we then sought to colonize a new one. And when we did that, we took key aspects from colony A to go and colonize colony, you know, planet B, and then colony, you know, planet A could no longer support itself. So now you're hopping back and forth between them, and you know, it's trying to keep multiple plates spinning, and ultimately they fall. So for us, before we can colonize, you know, basically leverage one planet as a launch pad to colonize another, we need to make sure that it's fully self-sustaining and that whatever we pull from it will not detract from it. So we almost need to overbuild and overhire here. You'll need to do the same thing with respect to your teams within those different solar systems.
And then Kyle had the question of, is it the one holding company for everything? So would you follow up, would you start the holding company first and then build the businesses, or do you start the holding company later?
So I'm not an attorney, so this advice is for information purposes only. Can we agree to that? I think there's no real harm in I mean, it's some additional legal fees, but having a holding company that that you do your investments and your purchase out of. So Digital Marketer has never been directly owned by me. Digital Marketer has always been owned by a holding company that represented my interests are represented up there. And there's a lot of good reasons to do that from liability, from a liability perspective. It also just makes it easier and much simpler from a cap table perspective. So now that you don't have all of these different holdings, that each one of them has their own kind of similarly complex cap table. So Digital Marketer is 100% owned by Scalable Equity. Traffic and Conversion Summit is minority owned by Scalable Equity, and the rest of it is owned by Clarion Ltd, which is a UK-based company. So what that means is you can bring in partners at the holding company level, or you can bring in partners at the planetary level, right? Depending on just kind of what makes the most sense for the deal. If somebody's going to be able to add value across the board, then maybe they can come into the top. In general, people don't come into the top.
And then William Wong is asking for clarification of what you're referring to as a cap table.
The cap table is simply the document. It's the capitalization table that says who owns what. So a cap table would be if there's one person who owns 100% equity in a company, then it's a very simple cap table. It's this person owns 100%. If you got 50-50 partners, then the cap table would list both people in the percentage ownership. And it can either be reflected as a percentage of ownership, which is common in LLCs and things like that, or as a number of shares, which is going to be more common in corporations. Roland, I believe, goes into entity structuring in Epic, so I would defer to him on those matters.
Also, Yev has a great question. He says, can you elaborate on over-hiring for existing companies with traction instead of completely independent hires for your other planets? How to make those decisions and evaluate the trade-offs?
Yeah, great question. So in general, what we're looking to do, let's take marketing, for example. If I've got a general manager, and that general manager has a head of product and a head of marketing reporting to them, what we're going to say to that general manager is, we want you to hire somebody for that head of marketing that you believe and we believe one day will be able to be a general manager. And furthermore, they need to have somebody on their team who could one day ascend into a marketing manager role. So very often when we're hiring for people who can do the job that needs to be done today. my recommendation would be to be willing to spend a little bit more to get somebody that's a little bit more experienced, to get somebody who's perhaps even a bit more overqualified, so that because it will give you the ability to expand. If you're always, and this is what we used to do, because Digital Marketer is a training company. We train marketers, right? So what we used to do is say, let's hire somebody who's, you know, sharp and who gets this stuff, and we'll teach them to be a really great marketer. That's fine if you only want to build within a given company. But if you want to be able to, again, take pioneers from company A to help colonize, from planet A to help colonize planet B, then the people that you leave behind need to be super duper strong. So sometimes what it looks like is, you know, double hiring for certain critical roles and things like that. What it can do is it can reduce your profitability in the short term, but it gives you a lot more scale a lot faster.
That's actually all the questions right now at this time.
Great. Well, that was just, again, context. So what I want to do right now is talk about how do we go about, like, how do I as a marketer put marketing strategies, in place so that I can know how are these different companies doing without even knowing kind of what good is versus bad and stuff like that. Okay, so what does it look like? How do you have this big 30,000 foot top down view to where you can say, yep, they know what the heck they're doing in terms of marketing? Because what I learned, I said this before, marketing a product is really, really hard. Marketing a business is really, really hard. Marketing an entire freaking solar system is a lot harder, and it requires a different way of thinking. So what I'm going to show you, you could apply to just a single company. Like, the methodology that I'm going to show you is the same methodology that we teach our elite coaching members in Digital Marketer to put in place for their own businesses. What I'm saying is understanding how to put this in place and really requiring that it gets put in place for the businesses that you have just oversight over is really important, so that you can have visibility into the company. Now, the kind of the first thing that I want to throw out is, and the first big shift that you need to make, if you primarily see yourself as a marketer today. So if you don't really see yourself as a marketer, if you're like, no, I'm an investor first. I know I need to know enough about marketing to get by, but I don't identify primarily as a marketer. If that's the case, then what I'm about to say doesn't really apply to you. But if you're like me, and you're like, I'm a marketer first, who, this is especially true for agencies, because I know a lot of the folks in this group are agencies, marketing agencies, which makes sense. As a marketing agency, you get to see kind of behind the scenes of a lot of different companies. It's a really good position to be in if you want to do equity deals. So if you're that agency and if you geek out on marketing, what you need to know is that tactics are the enemy of scale. Okay? Tactics are the enemy of scale. Roland and I got to kind of see this firsthand. We were actually at a dinner with, it was me, Roland, a friend of ours, Pete Vargas, and Pete had invited, I want to say about a dozen entrepreneurs, all of them doing, kind of the low end, like 2 to 5 million a year, and some of them that were kind of in the 10 to $20 million a year range. And what was amazing to me is all the people who are in that $2 to $5 million range, what they were talking about, like if you kind of listen into their conversation, they were talking about like funnel hacks and, oh, did you hear about this new Facebook thing? And, they were talking about all this like very specific tactical stuff. The people who had companies, certainly if they were north of 20 million and still growing, they were not really talking about those types of things. They were now way more talking about, business strategy as a whole. They were gone from the different tactical aspects. So I just, kind of want to point that out, because you need to know that the thing that makes you really good entrepreneurially speaking as a marketer is the very thing that's going to hold your company back as it scales. And it's definitely the thing that's going to hold you back as you look to acquire different companies. So this is what I want you to think about. And I want you to think about this for yourself. And I also want you to think about this as you build teams for the companies that you acquire. Okay, we call it the founder type matrix. Okay, the founder type matrix acknowledges that there are 4 different types of founders, 4 different types of entrepreneurs, and these are all uniquely valuable at different stages of the business. Okay, in general, in my experience, entrepreneurs are going to fall on this kind of spectrum where some of them are going to be more vision strategy minded and others are going to be more operational. right? So maybe you're watching this and you got in this because you got all these ideas and you see all these opportunities and that's why you want to acquire them. There's some people who they're less on the vision side and they just really geek out on the just getting their hands dirty and doing it. Now, if you're a successful entrepreneur, you're not going to be overly extreme in either one of these areas. You're going to have a decent balance. But there's going to be one that you kind of naturally default to. Or, and again, I'm saying this as an outside investor, the founder or the person who's running the company, there's going to be one that they default to. And it's critical that you identify this. It's critical that you either identify it in yourself and with your co-founders or in the people that you're investing in and potentially acquiring. What this looks like at an extreme visionary with no operational or tactical stuff, that's kind of that wild, harebrained, inventor person that always has an idea. And the second he gets traction, they move on to the next one. Like they literally do nothing. You probably know people like this, right? The pure operator is the kind of person who's never had an idea of their own. So they really just want to go out there and they just want to buy a franchise. They just want to buy a license. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just, it's much lower on kind of that visionary thing. If you're acquiring a franchise, you're not the one creating the vision for the company. Somebody else is doing that. So these are the kind of the two continuum. Another area though that I think is important to acknowledge is kind of this difference between early stage and late stage. Because there are some aspects of being a founder that are very helpful early stage that become massive liabilities in later stage companies. Okay, so kind of what I want to do is run through these 4 different founder types. I want you to know what they are. It can be helpful to identify it in yourself, but it's really helpful to have these in mind as you're thinking about the people running the companies that you are investing in. So if we think about somebody who's high on the vision, early stage, that's the inventor. We think about this person as the inventor. If we think still early stage, but way more operational, that's what we refer to as the driver. Now, the natural state of the entrepreneur is really kind of living in between these two zones, right? This is what kind of the serial entrepreneurs like me love. This is, if you've got somebody who's strong inventor, strong driver, and I'll tell you a little bit what they mean, and you want this person to kind of help scale a company from $2 million to $20 million in revenue, it could be a challenge if they're not willing to make some of the transitions I'm going to talk about next. So if you take still operational, tactical, but a little bit later stage, that's when we think about a manager, and late stage, but still that inventor type, that is the guide. So let's look at these, in a bit more depth. So the inventor is the creator of new projects and initiatives. They're looking at trends. They're looking at opportunities. They're thinking about their own instincts. And really, they create value through researching and prototyping new ideas. They've always got a new idea. That is the inventor. Critical in the early stages, critical at startup, critical pre-traction. If you don't have this person, nothing happens. They're the spark. The driver. They are they're the primary source of acceleration and momentum within a business. They're motivated by a desire to align resources so that projects actually get done. The driver creates value through in the trenches execution. At our company, Richard Lindner is a prototypical driver. Richard will get in, and have they heard from Richard yet, Deanna?
Sorry, I was muted. No, sorry. They were rescheduling that call, so that's why. So it will probably be in the next week or two. We just talked about that before you got on.
Yeah, so Richard is another member of the DT6, so you'll hear from him, and you'll hear like what a driver sounds like. I mean, this is somebody who, I'm more of an inventor. I can do the driver, but Richard is somebody who can take my disparate, crazy ideas that are totally unfinished and finish them. You want this person, if you're acquiring a business, if you're doing an acquisition, you're acquiring this business, and they're kind of in that initial momentum phase. They've got product market fit, but they really haven't, scaled up beyond a few million in revenue. You need this driver. You need this person here. The manager. The manager is a leader of leaders, manager of managers, driven by the desire to improve efficiency. The manager creates value by building, managing, and improving both people and process. If you can get a driver who can really adapt, who can mature into a manager, so somebody who is willing to say, to leave behind that, if it has, if it's going to be done right, it has to be done by me. If you can get somebody to abandon that notion and actually work with others to get things done and turn into a manager, it's one of the most valuable people you can ever have within an organization. One of the most valuable people you can ever have within an organization. Now, if you have somebody who's a manager by default, usually they're not entrepreneurial, that's when you may have a bureaucrat on your hands. So what I'm talking about is, more of an entrepreneurial type person who can develop into, because really the manager is the more mature, the more developed state of the driver. You don't want to be a manager too early. Early on, it's dig in, get your hands dirty. But at some point, if you stay there, then it'll never grow. So we need to develop into the manager. And then the guide, as you may suspect, the guide is simply a more developed inventor. The guide is the keeper of the vision and the culture, driven by a desire to grow strategically. The guide creates value by asking questions, offering a rational perspective, and holding the leadership accountable to the mission. I serve as a guide for digital marketer today. That's kind of my primary role at digital marketer. If you want to think about who a prototypical guide is, Roland Frazier. Roland Frazier is phenomenally great. And I'm not saying that Roland isn't a visionary and that he doesn't have ideas. I'm not saying that Roland won't dig in and get his hands dirty. He will. I mean, anybody who's experienced any success will do all four of these things. But Roland is the kind of person who is so phenomenally great at asking questions that just cut right to the quick. And learning to develop this is important. And so I will tell you, where you need to sit is in primarily that guide role if you want to be more of a passive investor, where you want to kind of develop into that. But I want you to begin thinking about these different, players on the team, because they're really important and they're really critical at different times. And usually, and I say usually, basically 99 times out of 100, you're going to need these in the following order. You start with having an inventor, then you really need a driver, then you need a manager. Then what you need is the guide, okay? Now, I said before that where you really need to get to is that guide stage. And I also mentioned that kind of the idea behind the guide is that it's all about asking the right question, right? It's all about asking the right question. So that sounds good, right? When you're the guide, you want to really be able to ask those hard-hitting questions that are very meaningful and that are going to cut to the quick. The issue is we need a framework for coming up with the right questions to ask, even when we don't have all the details, and even when we don't really know what the heck is going on. So how do I know exactly the right question that I need to ask one of our general managers about why something has stalled out, right? How do I know exactly what question to ask at the exact right moment to pinpoint into the exact area of the business where things might have stalled out, right? It's one thing to be able to say, just ask more questions, but what questions do you ask? We need a framework for that. So that's what I'm going to give you. All right. So for the rest of this, I want to give you a framework for, as the guide to these companies, to be able to ask better questions to the managers and the drivers and the inventors within them. All right. So that's what I'm going to go into right now. How do we do it? Right? How do we do it? The 3 steps to predictable portfolio growth. Now, step 1, and those of you who are familiar with digital marketer, you should be familiar with this concept, is to document the customer journey. Okay, step 1 is that you must document the customer journey. What do I mean by the customer journey? I simply mean the process through which a stranger becomes a prospect, becomes a buyer, becomes a multi-buyer, becomes a raving fan, and hopefully a referring fan. How does that happen? Every single business has a customer journey, right? Every single business has a customer journey, and it's not perfect. There's always going to be some variations, but in general, right, we know that people tend to discover digital marketer through an ad that we run. We advertise. We advertise on social, we advertise on Facebook, and usually we're advertising initially to some piece of content or to a lead magnet. People then engage with that, they opt in for it, they get on our list. Then we're gonna talk about, a low dollar, a lower ticket offer that we have going, and they'll purchase that. And after purchasing that, they'll then ascend into lab membership and then hopefully ascend into some of our higher ticket programs. And then maybe, just maybe, some of them will become a certified partner, which is where they're actually, actively referring us to other people. That is the customer journey in digital marketer. Every business is going to be a little bit different, but it is essential that this gets documented, because the reality is you cannot optimize until you first document. And I see people do this all the time. They jump in and they're like, we need more traffic. Let's get more traffic. Let's start running more ads. Well, is that the problem? Do you know that's the problem? How do you know you're not getting a lot of traffic and it's just not converting well enough, right? How do you even know once you get the traffic where it's supposed to go? Does everybody on the team know that? So step one, if you want steady, predictable growth, the first step is to document how growth actually happens in the first place. Now, the framework that we use at Digital Marketer to do this is what we call the customer value journey. I believe that we have made this document available to all of you inside of your members area. Is that correct, Deanna?
Yes, so it'll be in your Kajabi portal.
Yeah, so this document, along with links to a training on how to actually go and do this, is important. But generally, the way that it works is, we kind of map it out in 8 different stages of, awareness. So how do they see you, hear about you, find out about you? Engagement, what happens early on that kind of turns that initial glance into a stare? Usually basically, what are you doing from a content marketing perspective? Email newsletters, those kind of things. Subscribe. How you turn in visitors into leads that you can actually follow up with. That's the third one. Convert, right? How are you getting subscribers and visitors to make that small micro commitment, right? How does that happen? What does that look like? What's that little action, that micro commitment, that little commitment of money, that little commitment of time? In the past, we've taught things like strategies and tactics like tripwire offers, having somebody sign up for a demo or take a trial would kind of fall into this area. Again, I'm not going to go into really how you go about filling this out necessarily. There's links that we'll share with you on how to do that. The excite stage, this is an important one. What is the aha moment? It's a really good question, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. It's a really good question to ask during due diligence. Okay, if you're evaluating a company for possible acquisition, a really good question to ask the person you are buying it from is, what's your aha moment? When do you know, like, what's that moment where it's clear that a customer has gotten value from it? And how do you know that it's happened? Is this something they say? Is it an action they take? Like, what is that aha moment? For us at Digital Marketer, we know that if somebody goes into our Facebook group, our members only Facebook group, if they go in there and they ask a question and then they get an answer, that's an aha moment. Right, that's one particular aha moment. There are others, but knowing what that is, you've got a company who really has their stuff dialed in if they're crystal clear on their aha moment. Don't be surprised if they aren't. Even really great, successful companies aren't. And frankly, if you're buying a company, there's a good chance that it's going to have some warts, right? But having that documented, right? Because we want to build towards that aha moment. Then you get what we call the ladder of ascension, right? This is kind of the core offer, and then going into the different upsells. One product does not a business make, right? Successful businesses that can scale have multiple product offerings that will, expand the average value of a customer. If you only sell one product and it's $100 and your average customer value is $100, right? If you have $1,000 upsell and only 10% of the people buy it, now your average customer value just doubled to $200. That means you have twice as much as that you can spend to acquire new customers and still maintain the same profitability, all right? So what are the different things that they have in their product line to expand their customer value? Advocacy is, are they getting testimonials, things like that? Case studies, and then promoters is, do they have like an affiliate referral program? So again, this is a customer journey. Whether you use the one that we use or use a different one, it doesn't matter. The key is get it documented. And here's a big point that I want to make. You can actually get this done during the due diligence process. It is fairly typical when you are looking to acquire a company to ask the person you're buying it for to describe their customer journey, or to provide you with, what does a customer journey look like? What is your funnel? And it's also very typical to ask for metrics in that. Not everyone will have it, but even if you just ask them a question, they kind of talk it through, you should be able to get a general idea. It's a good way to know, just, are there any major missing pieces? If there are, that's fine. I like buying companies that are successful in spite of themselves. We love acquiring companies that are doing great with super broken marketing. That's where we can really add some value. But just having this is important. Any questions about step 1 and documenting the customer journey? I promise the rest of this is going to go really fast.
Yeah, you had a couple up here. Let's see here. You answered one of it. Kyle asked, how did you find the Richard driver?
Oh, it's such a hard thing they're usually made, not born. And so kind of they're people that you'll figure them out over time. So they're folks in your team who will just begin to emerge. They're the ones who will tackle projects and take things on. They're always asking for more. It's so hard to find that very often we will look to acquire a company, even if all they have is a really good driver. So yeah, I mean, if I had the secret for just going out there and hiring those folks, very often they're failed entrepreneurs. So folks who had the gumption to go out there and start their own thing, but maybe the vehicle they had picked, because maybe they lacked some of the visionary aspect of it, wasn't, they basically didn't bet on the right horse. But you could tell, like, God dang, put this jockey on a fast horse and they're going to win everything. So I failed entrepreneurs who failed kind of, and it's clear, like, wasn't the best idea, but God dang, that's a sharp person. That's kind of the only shortcut I've ever found.
That leads right into Frank's question, which is, what does the scalable team look like? Is it a company that you guys created from an A team that you put together, or is it a company that you guys acquired?
Both. It's a combination of. So there are acquisitions that we made and people who came along with those acquisitions. By and large, it is people that we have hired and who have kind of grown up with the company. So Richard's been there for a long time. There isn't really a shortcut to building amazing teams. I wish I could tell you that there were, but the way that you build amazing teams is you hire people before you can really afford them. You have a big vision that they'll buy into. You hold them accountable to the things that you say they're going to do, and you never let great people watch you tolerate somebody who isn't great. So the way that you build a team of great people is, unfortunately, you got to cull out the people who aren't great. And I don't really get into the, A player, B player, C player. I don't know what any of that stuff is. I mean, this idea of like only hire A players. Okay. Am I an A player? Like, who really is? Like, what I know is, I want to work with people who do what they say they're going to do. When they aren't able to get it done, they come and tell us ahead of time, and they're constantly seeking to improve and get better. So when you see somebody who's always wanting to improve themselves and they desire to be measured, that's when I know I got somebody who's solid. So they don't have to be perfect. They can make mistakes. But that's when you know it's solid. But yeah, it happens over time. We've been doing this for the company as it stands right now has existed in some form or fashion for well over a decade. So in that time, we've had some good people go through and come out, like Matt Swan, who's one of our, general managers, somebody who's here. Matt Swan worked for us, left, and came back. So very often it's people who are great and they're talented, and you don't have a spot for them, and they leave, and you stay in touch with them, and you're like, come back when the time is right. One of the most important roles of a guide is to cast a vision that's big enough that people want to come and be a part of it. And you're always in recruiting mode at that point too. You're always looking for talented folks.
Eric Jasinski had the question of, do you have a specific role on each planet that is ideal to control or set up the CVJ? Or is this done by an owner from the sun of the setup and then passed on to the planet team for management after the setup with the CVJ has been completed?
Yeah, the general manager is
the
general manager is uniquely responsible for making sure that all of this gets done. They're typically doing it in coordination with the marketing manager. A little bit of help from the product person, because the product person is going to be very helpful in helping to provide some insight on that kind of that excite stage, that aha moment. But yeah, the general manager is responsible for everything that I'm sharing with you here. They're working with their marketing person to do it. At the holding company level, we advise and consult. So we'll literally run, like, this is not a pitch for digital marketer and for digital marketers elite coaching program, but the digital marketers coaching program was spun out of the process that we put in place to consult with our own internal portfolio companies. We then taught it to our certified partners to consult, and then we decided to kind of open it up to others, frankly, because it's a deal flow engine for our portfolio company, if I'm being completely transparent, and it's a heck of a recruiting thing. But yes, to answer your question, this is the unique responsibility of the general manager.
And so Gia wants clarification. So the sun really doesn't have anything to do with running the actual planets?
No, they're no operational capacity whatsoever. They function as the board. The general manager is running it. They report into the board. There are dashboards that the board can view, and the board does view those dashboards and look at them and asks questions based on what I'm about to show you. And I'll show you exactly how to create the dashboards too.
Okay, and here's one more question from Gary. He says, how do you make sure that people have skin in the game? Do you give them a salary and interest in the sub and so that they can lose, or so they just don't have a job with an upside?
So we generally don't offer equity in our underlying companies. What we will, our general managers and the top level kind of performers, what happens is we will establish an amount of cash that needs to be kept in an operating fund. Let's say it's $100,000, just for argument's sake. Usually it's a bit higher than that. We generally want to have anywhere from, minimum 3 to 6 months of operating at that company level, right? So what does it cost to operate if this business unit made no sales whatsoever to, keep the lights on, to get everybody paid 3 to 6 months? If, I don't know, a pandemic's just struck, for example, what would that take? So let's say that number is $100,000. Every single month, we sweep up all the cash over and above that 100,000 up to holding company. So that gets swept up. So let's say there's 200,000 sitting there. 100,000 of that's going to get swept up to the holding company level. The general manager and some of the frontline leaders are going to participate in that. Generally, we're carving out about 10% to them, with about 5% of that going to the general manager. It can vary a little bit from time to time. And while we don't give equity, typically what we will do is, in the event that that business is sold, we will usually, typically compensate that general manager on a pro rata to what their distribution amount was. Now, there are times where that GM will have actual equity in the company. It just kind of depends, but that gives you a sense of the order of magnitude of things, at least, and how we handle cash.
And then Erwin says, where would you put the services company?
So when you talk about the services companies, the ones that are like legal, accounting, HR, those are sitting at the holding company level. Yeah, they're sitting at the holding company level.
Cool, that's all the questions for this part.
Great. All right, then let's build some dashboards. So we know our customer journey. Now, what I see a lot of companies do is they'll build a dashboard, and the dashboard will just be kind of random metrics, sales, stuff like that, right? But what we know is that the key to growing a business is simply to accelerate the throughput of that customer journey. The faster customers go through it, and the more customers that you can get going through it, the larger the company will be. So if you think about the customer journey, it's really like an assembly line. And those of you who have read, real quick, I'm kind of looking at faces, kind of raise your hand or maybe put in the chat if you've read the book, The Goal by Eli Goldratt. The Goal. All of you need to read The Goal. It's an incredibly long book. It's written in fable form. The audio version of it you might enjoy going through the audiobook version as opposed to reading the book. But the basic idea of The Goal, it talks about theory of constraints, and that's talking about operational excellence. And this idea that if you want to improve the operational efficiency of a factory, you got a factory that's making widgets. The point should not be to have each work center, right? So widget comes in here, then widget gets bent around, and then it moves to this work center, and then some stuff gets bolted to it, and then it moves to this work center, and then some other stuff gets bolted to it, and then it moves to this one and gets painted, right? A manufacturing line is made up of all these different work centers. And what Eli Goldratt is essentially arguing for in The Goal is that you shouldn't try to improve efficiency in each and every one of those. You simply say, which one is least efficient? Let's put all our focus there, because everything else is constrained by that one area. That's the concept of theory of constraints. That kind of ushered in really in the 80s. It was this big thing that was like that Toyota really perfected. So it comes from the manufacturing world, but it's just as easily applicable to business growth. If we think about a customer journey as an assembly line for, frankly, happy, successful customers. Unhappy, unsuccessful customers come in here. That's the raw materials. We then work on them, tweak them, move them through, spit them out the other side, happy and better off than they were before they arrived, right? That's what we want to do. And the success of a business has everything to do with how many can you flip through. So the same theory of constraints applies. So when you think about a dashboard, I don't want you to think about a dashboard in terms of let's just pick some metrics. I want you to create a dashboard. I want you to create a scorecard that is journey-based, okay? The scorecard isn't just a random smattering of metrics. The scorecard is based on the stages of the customer journey. So if you were applying the ones that we did with where there's the 8 stages, right? Awareness, engagement, subscribe, convert, excite, ascend, advocate, promote. Whew, I remembered them. Then what we essentially recommend that you do is that you build a scorecard where you pick 3 metrics, 3 key performance indicators at most. Maybe it's only 1, maybe it's 2, right? But 3 at most that will tell you how are we doing with respect to this particular stage in the journey. So let's go through, exactly how we do that. Again, just to kind of reiterate, we're going to track by journey stage. We're not going to track based on department, right? How's the product team? I mean, ultimately each company, each department needs to have their own metrics that they look at on a team basis. I'm talking about the top level view that you, as the guide, need to be able to see so that you can ask the right questions. This is the one that matters the most. Ultimately, this is what the general manager in concert with the marketing manager and their team is responsible for producing. So we're going to track by journey stage. Now, this Google sheet, we have provided for you inside your members area. So I'm going to walk through it. Just know there is a download where you can get it, can create your own. The way that you see, we actually have a tab down there for each month of the year. So the way that it is structured is this gets tracked on a weekly basis. I don't necessarily recommend as the guide that you look at it on a weekly basis, but you should have the ability to. Okay, this is a Google sheet so that you can look at it, other people can look at it. All right, I'm not suggesting that it be made available to the entire company unless you want to do that, but at least the leadership team should be able to see it. People can go in and look at it. And so each month is its own tab, and you can see each column represents a week. And we go ahead and put in, what were the dates that were in there. And then there's a remainder column because obviously some months will roll over. So this is a complete month starting on, the first, going through that. And, you may want to have it overlap, from the previous month. So what is the first kind of week of the month? If it overlapped with the previous month, put that in there, go along. It doesn't really matter what you do, just as long as you're consistent with it. Okay. Now, what I'm going to recommend that you do once you have kind of chosen the different metrics, and we actually provide you with metrics ideas. You can see that kind of second tab is metrics ideas that you could track, but talk to the marketing manager and the GM. How do we know that we're getting all the visitors that we want, right? What are the things that we should track? Unique visitors, pixeled audience. So we'll kind of give you some suggestions there, but that's where your marketing manager would be really helpful, in doing that. All right. So what I recommend that you do is I recommend that you actually go and fill this out for the previous month. Okay, so right now as it stands, we're early-ish in July. So go ahead and once you've picked on kind of what the 2 to 3 metrics are that you're going to track per stage, just go ahead and fill it out for the previous month. All right, fill it out for the previous month. And we want to do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it'll let you know, like, can you actually get these numbers? Sometimes a metric is so brutally difficult to come up with that it's not even worth tracking. But it'll also help you to brainstorm your targets, because that's the next one. You need to decide with the GM and with the marketing manager, what is good? Is 100,000 visitors good? Is 10,000 visitors good? Is 500 leads generated in a week or in a month good, or should it be 5,000? Here's the thing, you'll forget. And you will forget by an order of magnitude. You will not remember as the guide what is good and what is not. So on this target column, this is when everyone will agree. Everybody will get in the room and agree, this is what we are going to say is good. Now, how do you know if it's good? The first way to do it is just to fill it out for the previous month and say, were we happy with that? Was that amazing? Did we get really lucky? Should our target actually be lower than it was the previous month? Or is it generally indicative of what we got and we're going to call it good? So if you go back and do it for the previous month, that'll give you the context around which to come up with the targets. Okay. And all you want to do here, you don't want to kind of hold your GM's feet to the fire, but you want to say, like, so you believe that if we hit these numbers, you know, that's good. Like you feel really good about that. Yep. Okay, fine. In the beginning, trust them. All right. In the beginning, trust them. Go with that. I will also tell you, being in a community like the one that you're in with Epic is so important, because if you find other people who are in similar groups, you can kind of track and benchmark together, right? So to ask like, hey, so got this kind of property. One of the things that we're tracking is our conversion rate. You know, my GM is telling me, you know, conversion rate, opt-in conversion rate. My GM is telling me that our landing pages should be converting at a 25% thing. Is that good? What I would tell you is no, it should probably be at least 40%, right? So having people you can bounce some ideas off of and potentially call BS on your GMs is helpful, but in the beginning, they're the ones who are going to be accountable to it. So let them pick. Pressure them, but let them pick. Okay. So going back, we filled it out for the previous month. Actually, I should say, first of all, we picked the 2 to 3 KPIs that we're going to look at per stage, how we know if we're doing a good job. Filled it out for the previous months. Then we filled it out and got our targets. Now what we're going to do is we're going to begin tracking it moving forward. We're going to track it moving forward. And for the first month, you're kind of just gathering data. Does it generally mirror what it looked like it was doing before? Is it okay? Are we okay figuring out how to pick the different metrics? How's it working out? For the first month that you do it, you're not going to really be asking a lot of questions. You might even go 2 months where you're not really asking, you know, a lot of questions. But then we come to the status. Remember what I said, you will forget what good is. And so that's where the status column exists. And that's where now the GMs need to go in, and based on the gap between actual and target, they need to change the color. So now we got some color coding going on. All right. Now, what does it mean? Green means we are on track or we are ahead of goal. Everything is great. Everything is absolutely fantastic. Light green means we're behind, but we're okay. We'll catch up. You know, maybe it's the first part of the month, and you know, the thing that you're tracking for, you expect it to pick up at the end through seasonality or through promotional calendar type stuff. So lime green is, yeah, the KPIs show that we're behind, but it's a known current plan. We're fine. You'll see this a lot early on in the month. Okay. Yellow is we're behind, but we've got a path to get back on track. So we're behind. Some things didn't quite go the way that we expected them to, but we got a plan. We're going to get back on track. We have every reason to believe we'll get back on track. So the distinction between kind of that yellow and that light green is yellow, something didn't go quite how, it's not a matter of timing. Something didn't go quite how we thought it would. Okay. But we've adapted, we've adjusted. It's okay. Now the light red, kind of the orange, is we're behind. We're not so far behind that we can't catch up, but we need a little help. Okay. So yellow is we're behind. We feel like we can catch up. Light red is we're behind. We can catch up. We just don't know how. And red is we're behind and we got no freaking hope of getting back on track. So what this means now is that you, from an outside looking in, have the easiest job in the world when it comes to asking the right questions. How do you ask the right question? You simply look for red. You simply look for the red. If you see red, you start asking questions about that particular area. What's going on over here? What things are we doing? What types of pieces are you putting in place? And I'll tell you, if you have a general manager who has no clue how to fix something, then you've got the wrong person in the wrong role. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that they don't have the ability to fix it. It is not your job to fix it. It's your job to ask the right questions, and if possible, to unlock and to give them the opportunity, to give them the tools, the resources. So very often what we're doing is we're saying, you know, maybe they're saying like, look, if I just had more money, if I could just hire this one person, we could do it, but it's kind of outside of the budget. It's like, you know what, we're going to spend the budget, hire the person. Or they're like, if we had this tool, if we had this software, I could do it. Okay, great. We're going to free up the thing. We're going to do it. Right. Or maybe it's, I don't know how, but like I do. And so I'm going to open my Rolodex up to them to help get them the help that they need. Right. But your job is not to fix it. It's not to dive into to fix it. Your job is to ask the right questions, and then where you can, coach and consult and help them to achieving that objective. So if you're looking at it, right, and you're seeing a whole lot of red, everything is green, green, green until stage 3, the subscribe stage. Now you see red. There is no point whatsoever in asking a bunch of questions about the conversion rate at the convert stage, right? People aren't even getting to that stage. So you look at red and you look for it in the sequence through which people are going through it. So top to bottom. Do I see red? Nope, move on. Do I see red? Nope, move on. Do I see red? Yep. It doesn't matter if there's red below it, further down in the journey. Until you unblock the red that's above, they won't see it. So you fix it right there. Now, this really is the key, right, to shifting from that tactical to strategic. You don't need to know all the things to generate list size. You just need to acknowledge that this is the help and this is the place where we need help, and to ask the right questions and get them the help that they need to do it, right? So we ask the questions that guide our teams to only those projects that turn red to yellow and yellow to green. We ask the questions that guide our teams to those projects that turn red to yellow and yellow to green. This is important because even the most well-intentioned general managers, marketing people, CEOs, whatever it is that you call them on your team, what they will wind up doing is they will wind up fixing things that aren't broken, especially if it's an area that they feel competent in. They will fix things that aren't broken. You got to go to them and be like, hey, that's green. Don't fix that. We got to go here. That's what being a guide looks like. Now, here's the other thing that you'll see happen from time to time. And a question that you got to ask when you don't see any red. Seems like this one's been green for a while. I suggest, or better said, don't you think, Mr. or Mrs. General Manager, that we should maybe bump up those targets? Because I'll tell you, while breakthroughs happen when you turn red to yellow and yellow to green, the biggest breakthroughs happen when you turn green to yellow. In other words, where you raise the target such that that area that was green now becomes yellow. That is when good companies get great, right? And so once there's no more red, now it's about how do we turn green to yellow? And it all comes down to just this one sheet, this one dashboard. You got one dashboard that you can look at for all your companies. And in literally a couple of minutes, you can look at where's the red? Where's the red? What's going on? What are we doing to this? What answers do you hear back? That is how we scale growth. That's how we scale marketing. That is how we guide the predictable growth of our companies in a portfolio model. So that's what I got for you. I know we answered questions during, I know we're kind of at or even over our time. I do have, let me check my schedule, make sure I'm not running immediately up against something. I've got a little bit of time, Deanna. If there's any remaining questions, I'm happy to stick around and ask. So.
Okay, awesome. So let's see here. Erwin says you should have a color that when you're getting too much over your objective, this will tell you that you need to change your objective.
Yeah, in truth, that's what that green is. So that if you, because really what'll happen is, I love light green because it means that they're trying and they're getting. That dark green, if they're bragging like, oh, check it out, green, 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 it's like, that's adorable, make it yellow.
Is there a way that you can real quick just show the summary slide again from the red to green to yellow? They want to see it one more time.
Absolutely. So the red, in terms of what does it look like? Mm-hmm. Here's what I will do.
Or you can send it to me and we can add it to there you go.
So Deanna, I will send you the slide because as you can see, I never trust myself to actually remember what's going on. So I put in the comments what each of them mean. And so we will get you these slides and we will also kind of add to them the standards, like what each of them mean, because they're in there.
Awesome. And then Robert's asking, what about non-quantifiables?
Give me an example, Robert.
Robert, can you unmute yourself, sweetheart?
Yeah, hi, sorry. How you doing, everyone? Just things like the KPIs that aren't a metric in some business.
So give me
good behavior.
Yeah, give me an example.
It's for, I don't know, maybe customer satisfaction, but you can't necessarily put a metric on that without doing a survey or whatever.
Well, I mean, you can. So CSAT is something that you can do. Customer satisfaction is something that can go out. What you can also look at is average response time. So how quickly how quickly you're looking at, into those different areas. I will suggest, however, that is not a metric that really needs to be on this particular sheet. I mean, perhaps you could look at it in terms of advocacy, right? Because obviously if you're not really taking care of your customers and they're not going to become advocates, they're not going to brag on you. So maybe it shows up there. I'll grant that. That makes sense. And actually, I think that is one of the metrics that we have. So what's your average response time? But yeah, and it is very rare. And in that, like, there's a truly critical thing that you want to track where you can't come up with some way of doing it. Perhaps it is, you've got to be careful that the metrics that you choose don't encourage the wrong action. So I'll tell you, one of the metrics that we were tracking at one point, and this was in the advocacy, was a total number of tickets closed. Assuming that if a ticket was closed, that they were taken care of. Well, that just incentivized the customer care team to just, okay, so here's your answer, close. And people are like, no, that wasn't closed. They're pissed off. We've also had in there how long to close a ticket, forgetting that sometimes what it means to truly serve a customer is to kind of linger and to ask them, like, sometimes it'll take a week to really serve a customer. So you leave the ticket open. So what we ultimately settled on was average first response time was kind of where we landed there. But I would challenge that if there's a metric, there's always going to be some metric that's there. And I also want to point out, I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that business is entirely objective and can be run off spreadsheets. What I'm suggesting is it's the job of the general manager and the people operating the company. They got to figure that stuff out. That is not your problem. You want to be just looking at red, yellow, green, right? That's what you need to be looking at. All those other nuances and details, those will eventually show up in the other colors.
Sounds like a dream.
Awesome. And then Doug Foley said, in slide 30, when you went from the green to the yellow, was that backwards or did he miss something in the analogy?
No, Doug, I want what you will be doing as a guide is turning their green. Because remember, green is established by the target, right? So if they hit their target, green. So let's say, let me give you an example. It's been 2 months, and 2 months in a row, they have had a total number of leads generated has been green, and they're celebrating and they're happy. What you then need to do, and maybe the reason they're hitting is because the total number of leads generated, let's say it's 1,000, right? So what you might need to do then is go to them and say, like, you've hit this one 2 months in a row. What do you say we raise the target from 1,000 to 1,200? Now, instantly what happens is, the previous month they were at, 1,028. Now that 1,028, the previous month was green, the next month it's going to be yellow if they only get to that. So yeah, I mean, I meant what I said, turning green into yellow is important. Now, if you're going to do that, it can be really discouraging to the team if you don't celebrate the fact that you're doing it. So to say to the teams, like, and maybe even to a general manager, hey, every time we level up, and we increase a target, a color, then there's a bonus in it for you, or your team can kind of have a party or something like that. But you should celebrate it, and they should yearn to do that. It's not enough simply to meet your own standards. If you're not continually raising the bar, the business won't grow.
And then Aaron, let's see here. Gary was saying, are you effectively building a wholly owned SPV incubator?
So I'm sorry if I'm the only person who doesn't know what an SPV incubator is. Yeah, I know what an incubator. What do you mean by SPV, Gary?
Gary. Special purpose vehicle, Ryan. It's what we teach them to go get.
This is why Roland talks about this. Talks about these things. I don't know if it would necessarily fully qualify as a special purpose vehicle, but yeah, that is effectively what we have done. We define scalable equity as a really, I mean, it kind of serves as kind of a part startup studio and a part acquisition engine. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well,
yeah. See, I will confess that I haven't gone through as much of Roland's training as I should, because he does that stuff, so I don't have to. but he hasn't gone through this one either. So
All right, here's one from Anton. Can you please repeat how you compensate your senior folks when the business gets sold? Is it just the general manager that is included in this, or is it other people on the team?
So look, you can be as generous or as stingy as you want. In general, what we do is if we have somebody on the team and they are receiving some type of variable compensation, especially if it's a rev share, a profit sharing kind of thing, if they're getting a bonus, right? And let's say, again, hypothetically, they're getting a bonus that's like 5% of the profit goes to them. You know, it could be 0.5%. Like, I don't know. I'm not suggesting that that is the number, but you know, if that business unit gets sold, then our philosophy, and especially if that person is not necessarily going to be going on with the transaction, our philosophy is that if somebody helped to build that organization and now the sale of that company is going to be really an economic downside to them, I think it's incumbent upon you, who's benefiting mildly from it, to make sure to pay them for it, to show that appreciation. So while we were under no obligation to give bonuses, for example, when we sold Traffic and Conversion Summit, pretty much everybody who was involved in any kind of, you know, variable compensation package as it related to Traffic and Conversion Summit received a pro rata, so, you know, bonus that went along with that sale from the proceeds. So that's just something that we do. We don't tell people, by the way, that that's what we're going to do in general, unless they ask. I don't, you know, again, we don't necessarily put it in an employment contract or anything like that. There are times when somebody would demand, you know, equity or phantom equity, and then it is contractual. So Richard Lindner, actually, before he was a formal partner, he was an employee who received variable comp. But as a part of that variable comp, he also had some phantom equity options that in the event of a sale could be converted into actual equity. Well, that actually happened. It was great, right? So, but for us, that would be, you know, that'd be the rarity. And that's just kind of our, and a lot of that's because we don't necessarily have the immediate intention of selling. So a lot of times people are given equity in companies so that to justify being underpaid. We're going to pay people well, and we're going to make sure that they're really, really, really well compensated. And in the event of a sale, we're essentially going to treat them like the partners that they were.
And then Emmanuel says, are all of the employees paid through your holding company or paid by each individual company?
Yeah, great question. As it stands right now, and our goal is to keep it this way for as long as we possibly can, everybody is employed by the holding company because that gives us some economies of scale. It allows us to essentially hire somebody to work for a 3-person company, but offer them the benefits of a 100+ person company. So everybody works here. Now, sometimes when a company gets spun out of the solar system, then they're going to move on and get put on, you know, their own group. But we like to keep it, you know, all under, you know, one roof, so to speak, for as long as possible.
Okay, and then you have Yev says the 3 steps, which is to document and scorecard, etc., is a comprehensive system for your long term. But what about an upcoming new project with a new hire? Is there a minimum agile version to improve over time?
Well, the process that I just showed you here, it's difficult. The only shortcut that you have is by looking backwards over the previous month. So, I mean, I would say if you're looking at doing something for a really quick project, then probably what you're doing is, without doing all the scorecard stuff, you're simply, you know, interviewing and meeting with people and kind of it always starts with documenting the customer journey. Got to do that. So you document the customer journey, and then you say, where do we believe we've got a throughput issue? Where do we believe there's a bottleneck, right? And then just asking questions. Somebody's like, we need more traffic. Really? So, you know, you feel like you're converting all the leads that you could, or of the leads, we feel like, you know, what percentage of the leads are we converting into, you know, customers? Is that really the best it could be, right? Because you want to look for that piece that you can that you can go after initially, like that's going to have the biggest impact. And so that's what I would say, kind of the quick and dirty agile version is you document, you identify to the best of your ability, because you won't have data necessarily to support it, but identify to the best of your ability which one of those stages needs unblocking, and just go all in on that one. And I would do that while you're still building out this scorecard over time.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's the last of the questions. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, this was great. Hopefully you all found this helpful, whether, you're doing the business that you acquire, or again, this is what we do for our own companies here. So I'm not suggesting that you do anything that we don't do here. So hopefully you found that helpful. I'll give a shameless plug. If you've got marketing people and general managers on your team, you might want to send them through Digital Marketers Coaching Program. It'd be a good way to have them go and do that. So again, I know that's a totally shameless plug, but then we're training them so you don't have to. So it's probably worth, a couple grand to have us do that for you. So, and that is, I think, digitalmarketer.com/elite.
And they can reach out to me as well, and I'll hook them up.
Shameless plug. Yeah. So anyway,
awesome.
That's what we got. Thanks everybody so much. See you on the next one.
Everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan.
Happy deal hunting. Bye.
Bye.